Welcome back to the NoFX podcast. This time around, we are getting back into our list of top best of cards for cEDH, and we've covered pretty much everything. We're down to artifacts now. I believe we have another one to talk about some lands, but that's it. We're almost done with the series finally. I'm your host is Lane. As usual, I am joined by my co-host Kirk. How's it going, man?
Not bad, man. How are you doing?
Pretty good. Just enjoying my vacation, relaxing, that kind of stuff. So we don't have anything as far as housekeeping goes right now because we are kind of doing a bunch of recordings all at once. So not enough time for people to give us feedback, but we will get back to any of that in coming episodes.
So really quick, I have to interject. Lane is on vacation because he had a recent birthday. Happy birthday, Lane.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Here's to being 41. Woo. It's super exciting. They say it's all downhill after 40. I don't know. It feels kind of the same, except for, like my knee hurts more often.
You know how you can tell you're an OG, right? Every time I stand up, my hip pop.
Oh. That was, yeah, that was something. Yeah, I'll drink to that. Cheers. All right, so we're gonna dive right into it. We have a few honorable mentions that are basically laundry lists because picking 20 artifacts out of the fucking million that exist in this game was pretty difficult, but we managed to narrow it down, and basically our criteria was like it has to be kind of a staple, like it should see play in more than one list. And even though there are a lot of decks that might, so like for an example, like a Thorn of Amethyst, Stax piece, it might be played in multiple different lists, but like, is Stax really the top end of what you want to be doing right now? Questionable. Some of these kind of Stax effects go up and down in favor, so we'll just say that mostly everything here is going to have multiple uses, and we don't have a particular order, but we did kind of break everything down into essentially like defensive categories, combo potential, some Stax effects because some of them are super powerful, and that sort of thing. So without further ado, honorable mentions. These are pretty quick and easy. The major one and what separates cEDH from pretty much all other EDH formats are the free rocks, which are, for example, cards like Mana Crypt, Chrome Mox, Mox Diamond, Mox Opal, Mox Amber, etc., etc., etc. Those are cards that have become staples because they cost 0 mana to play. They usually have a downside, so like Mana Crypt has, on every upkeep you have to roll, well, you're supposed to flip a coin, but most of us roll for Crypt, and you pick your evens are safe, or your odds are safe, and then, which is wrong by the way, it's always evens are safe, and if you lose the roll, you take 3 damage. That's its downside. It is the kind of thing that casual players might look at and go, I don't want to take damage every turn, so this is a bad card, but it's not. And that's part of the reason why it sees play in cEDH over casual, but then also cEDH players want to be able to dump their 5 mana commander or Tivits or whatever of the world to be able to get them out on turn 1. You got to have these kinds of rocks and or rituals and other things. So
right, yeah, they let you go way ahead of the normal curve.
Right, because the normal curve is land pass, right? Unless you have a 1-drop effect. In this case, you could potentially drop 2 or 3 of these on top of some of the other ones we're going to talk about, and on top of maybe having rituals or other effects. So, yeah, it goes without saying these are all good. Again, they have downsides, but they're generally played in every single cEDH deck, with some caveats based on how many of them that you're playing. Next up is what I call ritual rocks, which is stuff like Mana Vault, Grim Monolith, Jeweled Lotus, Lotus Petal. It's basically one-time use artifacts. And I say one-time use loosely because there are a couple here, the Mana Vault and the Grim Monolith, that do have the ability to untap, but you have to pay the same amount of mana into them, I think. Mana Vault costs 1. You have to pay 4. You can only pay it on your upkeep, I think. Yeah, and then if you untap it, it taps for 3, so it ends up being kind of a bad investment to re-unlock it. So unless you have stuff that untaps the artifact, you're probably only using this one time. Grim Monoliths cost 2, It's got a similar effect, which you can unlock it whenever you want. So you can do it on somebody's end step, makes it a little bit better, but it's still the same problem of you're getting less back for your investment. So why bother? Jeweled Lotus sacrifices itself as this Lotus Petal, but Jeweled Lotus has proven to be a hit in cEDH because it really enables a lot of 3 to 4 mana cost commanders to come down on turn 1 just with a little bit of help. So. And Lotus Petal has been a staple forever just because it's that one extra. You play it for free. It can sit around for a long time. If somebody plays a Dockside, you crack it for nothing and they don't get the extra treasure. Or it's just a quick little dirty ritual.
Right, and there are even combos within these, like Power Artifact with Grim Monolith for your infinite colorless, or like Emery decks recurring Lotus Petal over and over, blah, blah, blah. So even those have potential. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Or if you're in like, what's the one that we just talked about the other day? Muldrotha, like you get Lotus Petal back so that if Muldrotha gets removed, you can have it there again to use again, etc. So like there are ways to abuse these, but 90% of the time they're one-time use, and that's that. And then everything else that's mana rock basically falls into the next honorable mention category, and it's just the other 1 and 2 drop staples. You have your Soul Ring, your Felwar Stone, your Mind Stone, Arcane Signet, Springleaf Drum, the Talismans, the Signets. There's more, but those are the ones that we just thought of off the top of our heads. Soul Ring is arguably one of the most powerful artifacts in the whole format. People have talked about banning it. Some people do house ban it. It's a mana crypt without the downside, but it costs 1. Some of the other ones have different pluses and minuses. Like Springleaf Drum, you have to tap it and a creature that you control to make a mana, but with like Roger, perfect home for it. Sees a lot of play in other decks as well.
Yeah, Magda likes that part of it, so yeah.
Yeah. And then, the Talismans and the Signets, they're just the color fixing in your colors so that when you're in conjunction with a turn 1 land mana crypt, you tap the mana crypt into an Arcane Signet, now you have some color. Maybe you have another thing like a Mox Diamond that you pitch your other land in your hand to, or a Chrome Mox. I mean, I've dumped like 3 of the 0 drops plus 1 of the 2 drops and a land, and then played a 6 mana commander on turn 1. And like, sure, you don't have much hand left, but usually that 6 mana commander gives you some sort of card advantage to get back into it. So that's really all there is to say about these. Fast mana and these types of rocks are amazing in cEDH, and everybody plays them. They're staples for a reason, but they weren't really anything to go into super depth about, so we figured lump them all together, and now let's get to the actual list. So we have these numbered, but again, no particular order. We're going to start with number 20 and work our way down to what we think is the actual best one here. I think we both agree it is number 1 for a reason on our list. The other stuff is all arguable, but that one's pretty good. So, Kirk, you want to start us off?
Yep, absolutely. So, number 20, we have Defense Grid, and to a lesser extent, we kind of did this on a few of these where even though we only picked 20, we also maybe lumped an honorable mention right next to it, which is Conqueror's Flail. But we'll start with Defense Grid. It's a 2 mana artifact. During each player's turn, each other player's spells cost 3 colorless more to play. So you typically only want to dump this the turn you're going for your win. Otherwise, you could accidentally hand off the win to the next person in turn order, because then your other opponents can interact with them, etc. But this is what it's for. It's typically played in a lot of turbo decks, especially non-blue, because they don't have the counter magic that they need, so they're slamming this into play to protect their win con. Conqueror's Flail just for
also because green has like City of Solitude and what is that, Dozen, also Sans White, so you don't have your Grand Abolisher effects that we talked about a lot in the last episode.
Totally fair. Yep. And then Conqueror's Flail, it's 2 mana artifact equipment, 2 to equip it. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each color among permanents you control. As long as Conqueror Flail is attached to a creature, your opponents can't cast spells during your turn. So it's a Cutsoul and artifact equipment.
Still notably has to be equipped, so if the creature does get killed, no different than an Abolisher getting killed, the effect would go away. But you're going to have to do that on your turn, or any other turn besides theirs, because you're not going to be able to interact while they're there. Conqueror's Flail doesn't see a ton of play, but I've used it in quite a few decks as just either an additional piece of protection, or in like if you're in mono blue, you don't have the Abolisher effects at all. I don't think mono red does either. That's where the Defense Grid comes in as well. So it's just another consideration you can make to have that protection if you're not in colors that provide it. But again, probably don't play it on, especially Defense Grid. I wouldn't play it on just a random turn, because then you may stop everybody else from being able to interact. Which is also why we liked Boromir over Lavinia, because Boromir has the sack clause, so you can at least let the guy get his free counter spell in to stop the combo player.
Good point. Yep. I saw Boromir's starting to sneak into Tim Necrom, the best format deck, blah, blah, blah. So, hey, there you go. You must have known something.
You were not wrong about it, that's for sure. I was definitely wrong about it.
Nah, you played it too. You were just a little bit behind.
Yeah.
What do we have on number 19? We have Skull Clamp next. Skull Clamp, 1 to play it, artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/-1. Whenever equipped creature dies, draw 2 cards and equips for 1 mana.
Can be very busted. I think the number one place it gets Cease Play and cEDH at least is like Tevesh lists, because you're constantly making little 0-1 thralls off of Tevesh. And even though Tevesh can activate himself to get card draw off of those, you could also use Skull Clamp to just get the card draw off the Skull Clamp and then continue to plus Tevesh so he gets beefy without having to use his minuses to get the card draw. So it's beneficial there. And I think any deck that runs, if you're in an elf ball deck and you don't care, anything that's making a bunch of tokens and you don't care about them, they're easy sacks, they're easy card draw. There's a lot of lists out there that inadvertently just make tokens. I mean, Najeela makes them. I don't think Najeela's running Skull Clamp, but it's a place where you could. Anything that's making incidental tokens is definitely... It's good card draw. And if you're in, let's say you're running Myrel in the command zone, that's making tokens every turn, or Adeline. They're both mono white, so their card draw is better than it used to be, but it's still lacking in some cases. So, that's kind of where I would see using this. Another interesting caveat, in the Arden Tana Hipster Stacks build, it can take, if you're playing Arden at all, you can literally attach it to other people's mana dorks, and you get the card draw while killing it. So, that's the spice.
Arden loves this card. Cole, the red-white Cole, also plays this because they play all their little free guys and equip this up and get a bunch of value. So
yeah, there's a few places for it, and that's why we thought it was worth including.
And it's nice because on some of those decks, it is a 1-drop artifact that can be tutored with like Urza's Saga,
Trinket
if that's ever relevant. There you go. Cool. Moving on. Up next, we have Cursed Mirror. So this is a colored artifact. It's 1 red and 2 colorless. It enters the battlefield. It taps for red mana. But as Cursed Mirror enters the battlefield, you may have it become a copy of any creature on the battlefield until end of turn, except it has haste. Now, if you do this, I believe it loses the ability to tap for red mana that turn, unless their creature or the creature you're copying can do that. But you don't care. You're copying your Dockside, your whatever, your Thassa's Oracle, who knows.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that sounds right. I'm not sure if that's a thing. I've literally never cast it and said, I'm just going to tap it for red after I copied that thing. Like, never. I either have used it to copy something big and beefy that I can swing with, or something with a cool activated ability, or number one target 9 times out of 10 is hitting either my own or another Dockside to get more value. And then afterwards, as long as you didn't turn into a creature and it dies, it just goes back to being a normal mana rock, which it's expensive, but red doesn't have, outside of the talismans and the signets and like Fire Diamond, like what else does red have as far as mana rocks goes? I mean, there's those mirrors, but like who the fuck's playing those? An Ornithopter of Paradise, I guess, but I don't know. I think it's a pretty decent hit. It's a Fimage for red, which red doesn't really have, and then it turns into a mana rock, so it doesn't even go away. So that's pretty cool. Because you don't even want a Dockside for another turn. You want it to go back to being a mana rock.
Right, yeah. I mean, a lot of times I see this even in like Godo builds. Instead, your math now is 9 because you play Godo, then you play this and copy Godo, and then it dies, but you still get the ETB trigger. Or I've seen it in like Dargo lists with Ruthless Technomancer. I don't play that particular deck very often, and I haven't dusted it off in a long time, but I have seen a buddy of mine do that where they do some looping stuff and win. I don't know. They create infinite mana and infinite Dargo casts. Who knows? One of you Dargo players can explain that stuff. But there you go. The card's very powerful.
I think it sees play in numerous red lists, and
absolutely.
I've even played it in Rakdos and Boros and whatever too. I think where you probably cut it is when you start getting it up into like 4 or 5 color. Then it's probably maybe even 3. It's probably not as great, but it's a really strong card either way.
Yep. I mean, there is an argument for it for another card on our list. Cloudstone Curios. As this enters the battlefield, if it's entering as a copy of another creature that's not an artifact creature, it's entering as a non-artifact, so it triggers Cloudstone. So you can also do weird Dockside loops if your opponents have Dockside with this. Anyway.
Sure. Yeah.
Enough about that. Silly ass card. It's very good. Yeah, in a similar vein, we have Imposter Mech. It's 1 blue and 1. It's an artifact vehicle, and it has power and toughness of 3/1. You may have Imposter Mech enter the battlefield as a copy of a creature an opponent controls, except it's a vehicle artifact with crew 3, and it loses all other card types, and it has crew 3.
So you basically, same thing as Curse Mirror, but it sticks. So it is a phantasmal image, but it's on a body that arguably better than Phantasmal Image, because Image comes in, it's the same mana cost, but it comes in, it copies something, but then if anybody targets it with anything, it could just be a fucking untap effect, and it's just dead. Because it has a sacrifice clause on it, which it's still always been good, and it's usually you get your value out of it before it dies, but in some instances, you want the creature to stick around, and in this instance, it's going to stick around, and it's still going to have crew, so if you happen to get a dockside with it, you can crew it. Well, maybe not with the dockside, bad example, but I guess you could crew it with the dockside and something else, and then turn it into a 3/1, and now it actually, has some value.
It becomes the power and toughness of the creature you copy. It loses the 3/1, and it loses all other card types. So whenever you copy something, if you don't have a copy of creature, it's a 3/1. If you do have a copy something, it becomes that creature's power and toughness when you crew it too. Very weird.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I mean, I've never used that part of it. It's really just another image that doesn't have the negative downside to it, so why wouldn't you play it?
I see a lot of people use this for, it used to be to copy the Chroms and the Tymnas of the world, so you have a Chrom and a Tymna that can't die to creature removal. Now I see it played a lot to copy an Orcish Bowmaster that an opponent has, so you can copy their Bowmaster, kill their Bowmaster, and then any future Bowmasters can't kill Imposter Mech because it's not a creature. They'd have to have artifact removal to kill it, which is really nice.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of why, Shorikai works, because it's not a creature, so, there's a lot of stuff you can do with it, and nobody can do anything because it's an artifact. Yeah, this one's good. They're very close, similar vein. They both do something a little different, and they're in different colors, so, you're not going to have both of them most of the time. You're probably going to only have access to one, but in the low-color decks that don't have... If you're in blue, you already have access to copies. This is just another one on top of all the other ones you're playing, if you want a lot of these effects. But if you're in, maybe... Grixis, and you just need one of these, I'd pick this over Image, especially because it does feed Dockside, which is the downside, but it helps feed your Mox Opal that requires you to have Metalcraft, and there's other artifacts out there that require that too, creatures as well. So I don't see that as being a whole big negative downside. And if you copied the Dockside with it anyway, who gives a shit? You already got your value.
Yeah, exactly. I think I honestly do see an uptick in this being played because of Orcish Bowmaster. You want an Orcish Bowmaster that kills theirs, and they can't target yours. That's where I see. This card got played before, but now I've seen it even more. So.
Yeah, that's a good interaction for sure.
Up next, we're kind of in the same vein of the artifacts that have a color identity. We have Wishclaw Talisman. It is 1 black and 1, an artifact. Wishclaw Talisman enters the battlefield with 3 wish counters on it. You tap a colorless or a generic, tap it, remove a wish counter from Wishclaw Talisman. Search your library for a card, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. An opponent gains control of Wishclaw Talisman. Activate this ability only during your turn. Couple of weird little caveats with this one. It's only during your turn, but it's not sorcery speed. So you can respond to this if somebody's trying to do something and you need interaction and response. You can activate this on your turn. Doesn't have to be sorcery speed. That's kind of a neat little thing that a lot of people forget about. The other huge piece of this, besides just being another black tutor who doesn't love that, if you can activate it and then untap it and activate it again with the first activation still on the stack, you can remove 2 wish counters and tutor 2 cards. I start to actually see that happen more often with cards like Manifold Key and Voltaic Key that are starting to see more play because of another card up on our list a little higher, where you're getting 2 activations off this stupid card. And then if you can tutor 2 times, you probably win. If you don't win after tutoring 2 times, someone else just was so far ahead or had the right interaction at the right time or something. But a lot of times you tutor twice, you probably win.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Can't you get it back with Homeward Path?
I think Homeward Path only does creatures. I could be wrong, but I
feel like there's a card that does that, where you can get it back so that people can't use. Is it the Rona deck that does that, where you give it away? And
you can bounce it right back to your hand. Another cute thing you can really do with it is activate it, tutor up something, give it to an opponent who you're going to kill that turn. kill
Yeah,
that player, and then you get it back. So
or if
that
you have
happens.
a bounce spell, that would make sense too. You give it to somebody, and then right before it goes to their turn, you bounce it back to your hand. There are ways to keep it from happening, but then there's also usually strategically you either give it to the person who's last in turn, so the guy behind you that just passed turn to you.
Right.
You usually give it to him because he's not going to be able to use it until the table's gone around, and a lot of the times you're only cracking it because you know you can win, because you have other tutors in your hand, or you're cracking it for an ad nos because you have the mana, and now you're going to ad nos, and you don't really care that they have it. But then other times, sometimes it can be used politically, where you look at the board and you go, well, that guy's got one land and everybody else has got stuff. So I'll just give it to that guy because what's he going to tutor for? Maybe a land. Like, maybe it's completely not threatening. And you can also make the deal, hey, I'm going to give this to you so you can go get that land that you need so you're not completely out of this game, but you got to give it back to me. And then you still get the 2 tutors. I've done all.
If they honor the deal, you never know.
Sure. Most people I've played with have been honorable enough, I suppose.
That's
but
fair.
I've also given it to somebody and then had them just sacrifice it for something else, and it was like, oh,
sure. I mean, it also has the weird upside. Like you can activate it, give it to somebody else, and then the dock side you just tutored up has one more artifact on your opponent's battlefield, so you get one more that count. Another really powerful move. If you can activate it, but you can't see a clear line to win, you can either like you said, Islaan, hold it up and not use it. It just sits there until it comes back around, or you can activate it and go tutor up your opposition agent and give it away, and then somebody else goes to activate it. Haha. So. Very powerful card, and it sees a crap ton of play. If your opponent's playing black, odds are better than not that this is in their deck.
I think I play it in every deck in black, regardless of amount of colors, just because it's another piece. And the disadvantage to it is that you're giving potentially tutors away to other people, but you're the first one that gets it, and it's non-conditional, and it is not revealed. So it's demonic tutor. So it's the best kind, and it goes to your hand. So how can you go wrong? And it's cheap. Yep. It's like 3 mana to cast it, which is a Grim Tutor, without the life loss. And it's an incremental. It's an incremental purchase basically, because most of the time you play it, you don't immediately crack it. You play it and then you do other things because you got it early, and then you crack it later when you need the tutor. So I mean, it's obviously not a demonic tutor, but it's also less likely to draw counter spells too. Like it's just people usually let it resolve because they're like, whatever, you'll tutor and maybe you give it to me.
Yep. The one other caveat with it is just, as Islaan said, be careful when you're activating this. Don't just go willy-nilly tutoring up something and give it to the next person in turn order to have them who already tutored once just slam their win con. Just, make sure if you are activating it, have a plan. Shouldn't need to be said, but it needs to be said. So there we go. Up next, we have Cursed
Moving
Totem.
into the stacks package.
Yeah, hell yeah. Here for it. 2 colorless artifact. Activated abilities of creatures can't be activated.
So it does affect your own stuff, but you usually play this in a deck where you don't have activated abilities on your creatures. This hoses anybody that's on mana dorks. It hoses anybody that has abilities like Thrasios, Kinnan, any activated abilities. It notably doesn't hit triggered, so Tivit still doesn't give a shit about this. Tivit can run this because it doesn't really do anything. But there's a number of commanders that can run this. I run it usually in decks where my commander has triggered abilities only, so that the activated portions don't care, because that's usually what you're trying to hose as the commander. But sometimes, again, dorks and other things, it hoses Magda's ability to crack treasures and do the thing. She could still bank a bunch of treasures, but until this thing goes, she can't use them.
Yep.
So it only hits creatures, but the meta has shifted to very creature-heavy strategies, and a lot of them are like Kiki-Jiki and stuff that has an activated ability, and now you can't do that. So,
yep, this one it sees a whole lot of play in like decks like Yuriko too, because it doesn't stop ninjutsu, so it's kind of funny.
Nope.
Up next, what do we have? Torpor Orb. I have a soft spot in my heart. I love this card. 2 colorless mana artifact. Creatures entering the battlefield don't cause abilities to trigger.
So yeah, anything that you play, if this is out, you play a creature with an ETB, nothing happens. And that's literally all it does. But it is the only artifact of its type that does this. And notably the only way that you can have this effect if you're not in white, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. But to my knowledge, like there's Hushbringer, there's Tocatli Honor Guard, there's Hushring Griff. I think that's it.
There's an argument you could say like some of the blue stuff, like the new blue card that just came out, or that has like the Stifle Pithing Needle type built into
Sure.
that blue creature, but otherwise, yeah,
That
for the
literally
most
just
part,
came out.
yeah, that one. And I mean, there's like Stifle and Trick Bind, but those are one and done, which a lot of the ETB triggers are one and done, but not always. So yeah, that's really it. I mean, this card says I don't want to lose to Dockside or Thassa's Oracle if I can avoid it.
Mhm.
There you go.
And those are two huge portions of the win cons out of the format. So that alone
I mean,
should mean you'd want to play this. But if you are on a heavy ETB list, and you may play this even if you're on Dockside, because maybe you can get rid of it, or maybe it's just, at the time you need it and you just hold on to your Dockside and somebody else blows it up. Whatever the case, you're probably not. You're probably only playing this in a deck that maybe has like one or two ETBs, if that. And it's easy to build a deck that doesn't have any. So
for sure. I mean, it stops Spell Seekers and Imperial Recruiters and Recruiter of the Guards and all that if you're playing those in your deck, but it also stops them from your opponent. I mean, it's just it's a very powerful hate piece that a lot of decks don't want to see in play.
sometimes it shuts the index downs altogether. I've seen that happen where somebody's like, oh, this is the legit only stack piece that I fear, and you played it on turn one, and now I just get to sit here. I've had it happen with other ones on our list, so yeah. A lot of times this kind of effect, along with some of the other cards that we've already talked about, with Cursed Totem and some of the other cards that we'll mention here in a bit, a lot of times you're running multiples, that hit from all different angles. And then if you're in white, you also have the creature versions of this, so you can really stack up on it if that's what you want. There's a lot of redundancy in most of these effects. It's just this is the artifact version, and that's why we wanted to talk about it.
Moving on to another lovely stacks piece. This one is Null Rod. 2 colorless to play it. Activated abilities of artifacts can't be activated. So this is the artifact that hates artifacts. It
is only replicated in a few cards as far as this effect goes. I mean, we've talked about in other shows, some of the stuff that makes artifacts come in tapped, which can be a powerful effect in its own right, but it's not permanent. This houses any clues, any treasures, any map tokens, any food tokens, any clue tokens, any, am I missing any gold tokens?
Yep. But also all the honorable mention mana rocks and other powerful cards, which we will talk about more on this list. Absolutely.
And cEDH is a greedy format, so the people are playing a lot of those rocks, and then they're also playing Docksides and things that will make artifacts that can't be tapped. So you drop this on a turn 2 after people dumped their hands full of rocks, and all of a sudden they can't play. And again, only replicated really in a couple of cards. There's like Collector Oof, and there's Stony Silence, and that's about it as far as just shutting them off completely.
And Karn, sure. That might talk to me, but it's 4 mana, so
yeah. And all of those are played pretty heavily. This is just another option. In one of my Selesnya decks, I'm running this and Collector Oof and Stony Silence. And I don't think I'm on the Karn, but like just having the redundancy because I'm not running artifacts and I don't care about artifacts, so I just want to shut them all off.
Even the greedy decks that run this sometimes will still run, a Jeweled Lotus or a Mana Crypt or something because those things are just so powerful turn 1. But yeah, this card is a lot of times you see it in green decks just because you have the ability to produce massive amounts of mana from your mana dorks, so you don't need to worry about them. But yeah, this card's very powerful.
Yep.
Let's see. Up next, we have another lovely hate piece. This one is Graph Digger's Cage. It is a 1 mana creature. Cards in graveyards and libraries can't enter the battlefield. Players can't cast spells from graveyards or libraries.
This notably hoses like Hulk decks because Hulk decks pull shit out of the grave or out of the library. Into play directly. Same with like Court of Calling, Natural Order, some of the other tutors that just rip something out of the library, put it on the field, and then also affects the same thing as far as grave stuff goes. So recursion, and then
you can't cast spells from graveyards or libraries, so it stops
library. So it also stops the like cascade effects and now discovery, because you'd be flipping and then you'd be casting it from your library. So like that doesn't work anymore. Like it takes care of quite a bit of stuff for 1 mana. However, a lot of times it will hose you too. So it is something that you have to either not care about it and have a pivot plan, or you really want to build around it. And its cousin, which you can read off here in a second, is very similar, but kind of takes things to another level.
Yep, and that one's Weathered Runestone, non-land permanent. It's 2 mana, sorry. Non-land permanent cards in graveyards and libraries can't enter the battlefield, and players can't cast spells from graveyards or libraries. So this one notably hits non-land permanent cards instead of just creatures.
but it is one more mana.
Library.
So
yep, it's super good, and both of them are super good against your birthing pods, which we might talk about later. It stops your Green Sun Zeniths, your Finale of Devastations, etc., etc., etc.
So Evolution, yada yada. Notably, though, Runestone doesn't see as much play, I think, because of the one extra. You know, stuff like Urza Saga or Trinket Mage are going to get your Graph Digger's Cage, whereas the other one, you're just kind of SOL. And then also, like I said, I've had this one slammed down on turn 1 against me when I'm playing like a Hulk deck, and it's like, well, until I can blow that up, I'm sitting here doing jack shit. So
yeah, I don't think Magda likes this card. I don't think it depends on what the build is. I know Kinnan doesn't like this card. Let's see. This one we kind of have a grouping of them lumped together. They're all used in a similar vein to end the game or generate infinite in some way or another. And those would be, I'll just read them all off here. We've got Kark Clan Ironworks. It's the 4-drop, sack an artifact, add 2 generic to your mana pool. You have Ashnod's Altar, 3 mana, sack a creature, add 2 generic to your mana pool. There's Phyrexian Altar, which is a 3 mana, sack a creature, add a mana of any color to your mana pool. And then there's also Altar of Dementia. It's a 2-drop, sacrifice a creature, target player puts a number of cards equal to the sacrifice creature's power from the top of their library into their graveyard. So mills, basically.
And they're all used in different ways. We lumped them together because they all have a similar sack a thing. You either get mana or, in the case, the last altar is kind of lumped in because it's still along the same lines and sort of game plan. KCI is mainly like Teshar lists. I've seen it other places, but that's the one real main place where it kind of got a name for itself in EDH, because it has like sack this artifact, you make mana, then you use the mana to cast another creature that brings that artifact back, and then you sack it again and get mana to do another creature, and then you form a loop where you basically just sack and recur until you've got infinite mana, and then you use that mana with an outlet like a Ballista or something else. Ashnod's Altar, it's a little harder to combo with. A lot of times it's just a value piece. Phyrexian Altar, because it generates colored mana, you can use Gravecrawler or whatever. It's like as long and then it there's other
Dargo
zombies that like drain. Yeah, there's like zombies that drain the table, or like Zulaport Cutthroat or whatever. You have that out. You get the zombie out. You sack it to the altar. You make a black. You use the black to cast it from the graveyard. Rinse, repeat. Drain the table. Yeah, they all have their uses. And then, you know, if you can do any sort of loops where you can continuously sack something and recur it to the Altar of Dementia, you can either do your own like Underworld Breach loops with it to, you know, mill yourself and then do whatever to get to the win, or you can just mill all your opponents out and then they draw an empty libraries and lose the game. So
yep, yeah, I see it in like with Dargo decks with like Bergie, and then boom, they can mill everybody out. Or I play it in like Kroxa and Kunaros. You mill yourself until you get your win con, and it's silly.
Yeah, it's got a lot of applications. Like I said, the first 3 probably see a little bit less play, but they're usually just kind of value pieces unless you have the combo. Altar of Dementia tends to be something that is used in decks that want it to combo with. It's kind of their end game, so it sees a little bit more play, but they're all pretty versatile, pretty good.
Free sack outlets. Turns out if you have a card that has do nothing, sack something for free, whether it's artifact, creature, whatever the hell it is, it's probably powerful, and depending on the CMC of the card and you know what the effect is, may be worth looking at. So anytime a new set comes out, that's one of the things I'm always looking for, is what free sack outlets did they give us? And what do they do? Like in this last set, there's a black-white vampire that's a free sack outlet that we didn't talk about in our review that it's got me thinking about it a little more. So
there's a guy in the cEDH groups that I run in that built that, and it does a thing. I don't like it personally, but it does a thing. It is a free sack outlet that Pauper is lacking in some cases, especially in the command zone. So yeah, it can do some stuff.
Up next, we're going to go to the old stations. We've got Grinding Station and Blasting Station. Grinding Station is 2 mana. Tap it, sacrifice an artifact. Target player puts the top 3 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. Whenever an artifact comes into play, you may untap Grinding Station. I believe it triggers when it sees itself enter the battlefield too. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I believe so, yeah.
And then there's Blasting Station. It's 3 mana. Tap it, sacrifice a creature. Blasting Station deals 1 damage to target creature or player. Whenever a creature comes into play, you may untap Blasting Station.
Both are used in loops. I mean, one of them obviously is kind of similar to Altar of Dementia. There was a cycle of 5 of these, I think, but
yeah, there's like Salvaging Station, Summoning Station, and I don't know if there's another one. Those are the ones I remember.
The other ones I've not really seen used all that much. These are the two that
Same.
see the most. Grinding Station with Breach and a Mana Crypt. Correct me if I'm wrong. Like,
Yep, Mana Crypt works. Mana Vault.
mill through your list.
Boring. Yep.
Because you're milling, and then you can exile those to the Breach, or to the Breach to bring the mana rock back that you sacked, and you can cast it for free, and then you untap, and then you just blast and blah blah blah, or mill.
Yep, you can even use like a Lotus Petal or a Chrome Mox and just go infinite. And just you don't gain any mana, but you can still loot through to find what you need. So
right,
for sure,
that's generally how I've seen them used. It's usually in conjunction with Breach, although I'm sure there's other ways to make them work. I'm not an expert because I don't use them that often, but they are classic cards that have been used for a long time.
Up next, we have Cloudstone Curio, or if you're into Middle Earth, it's Elisar the Elfstone. Anyway, Cloudstone Curio it is for me. I love Middle Earth, but I don't know that name from the books or the lore or the God only knows what it came out of in that universe. It's a 3 mana. Whenever a non-artifact permanent comes into play under your control, you may return another permanent you control that shares a permanent type with it to its owner's hand. That includes lands, creatures, etc., etc. So, where do you see this used the most? It's with
Dockside
red cards, and they're named Dockside Extortionist, or the new little triple underline goblin from Unfinity.
Yeah.
I don't know what the hell to call that card. Blind Goblin
whatever.
underscore Goblin, Blank Goblin, whatever the hell you call it. That card or Dockside Extortionist is where I see this used the most to go loopy and create infinite. And there you go. Bob's your uncle.
I also notably used it in Sithis for a while. I don't know that I have it in the deck anymore, but it was basically just if you can flicker because your commander has card draw on it. If you can play one cheap one, bounce the other, play it, bounce it, play it, bounce it, play it, bounce it. You can effectively draw your deck if you have infinite mana, which is possible with some of the other combos in there. Could be a way to finish it out. Well, was it Meticulous Excavation? I think it is. Also works, which is what I ended up subbing in for Cloudstone because it's actually an enchantment, but it has the whole clause of being able to bounce an enchantment to your hand and then play it. There's also a couple cards in that list that specifically on the enchantments themselves let you bounce them back to hand. So there's a number of ways to do similar things, and it ends in drawing your deck. And then, finale with all your creatures on the board or whatever.
I've seen it in crazy fringe lists that use everything from Ganex, the dragon, that whenever a dragon enters the battlefield, you make a treasure, or whenever you cast one or the other. And I've seen it in Village Bellringer loops with green decks where you have some Circle of Dreams Druid and something else, or the white-green Selesnya, whatever the hell it's called. That not
Priest
the
of
there's the
Titania works if you have enough elves out.
Yeah, something with like Hyrax Tower Scout or something. Yeah, it does weird stuff. I've seen it used in other loops, but you typically see it in red with Dockside more than anything, I think.
And usually with infinite Dockside loops, you're winning the game. Especially if you're in like Corvold or something, and like that just turns into sacks and draws, and there you go.
Moving on.
Sacked up.
Aetherflux Reservoir, or as affectionately people called it, Fishbowl for the long time. 4 mana. Whenever you cast a spell, you gain 1 life for each spell you've cast this turn, and you can pay 50 life. Aetherflux Reservoir deals 50 damage to target creature or player. Never knew until just this moment that you could target a creature with it. How about that?
So this one's weird because it's essentially like it's kind of a storm card. So if you've already cast 6 spells and then you play this, it still counts the next one you cast as 7, so you gain 7 life right off the bat, which is weird. But then otherwise, if you just start with this on, it's like the first one gains you 1 life, then the second one gains you 2 life, then the third one gains you 3, and so on and so forth. So it just exponentially gets bigger to the point where if you can storm, infinitely or close to, as long as you can storm to where you can get up to like 151 life, you can blow up the table. Also notably, one of the coolest interactions I've ever seen with this card in my entire career, I was at an LGS, my friend was playing a deck that had, I can't remember the name of it, but it's a white creature that basically says absorb the damage and turn and make it like a 50-50 or whatever.
Oh, it's like some 1 white and 3 thing with flash or something weird.
Yeah, so like Homeboy was like, he'd already killed us, and he went to go kill him with the last 50, and my friend was like, flash this in, and fucking absorbed 50 damage, and then went to his turn and smacked the dude for 50 with the creature. It was fucking hilarious.
That is hilarious.
Craziest shit I've ever seen. That's not something you're gonna see in cEDH, I don't think, but it was pretty crazy.
I've seen somebody go to try and kill an opponent with this, paid 50 life, and they were down to like, I don't remember, 3 or 2 life. They couldn't, go infinite and create infinite life to just dome everybody with it, but they sat there with it. They were at like 52 life or 53 life, and the next person that went to attack them, they're like, okay, I'll remove 50 and deal 50 to you, or pay 50 to do 50 to you, and then somebody bolted them in response, so they died, and that trigger went off the stack, and it was hilarious.
It is a card that's kind of fallen out of favor. It used to be very, very much played in a lot of decks that could do combo-y stuff to gain, or stormy stuff to gain the life and use it. I've used it in the last few years, but I haven't used it like religiously, and I think we're going to get to a point where you can see like where it might be played after we get through a couple more of these. But yeah, it's still not the worst thing you can be doing, but it's not the best thing you can be doing anymore either.
Totally fair. Without spoiling some of the cards right above it on the list, I see it played in Burgi with Burgi Grinning Ignis to get Infinite Storm and kill everybody.
Sure, that's Infinite Storm. Yeah, if you're doing that still, then this is fine.
Anyway, moving on, we have the next card on our list, Sensei's. Okay, this one's gonna drive me insane. Is it Sensei's?
It's
Divining Top.
Well, because if you think of D&D, it's divination. It's not divination, so it's Divining Top. But I know plenty of people that say Divining Top.
I hear Divining Top all the time, and it just makes my brain break. So I don't know. I've heard it so many times now. I'm not convinced on what the hell the correct pronunciation is. So I just think I say Sensei's Top and just skip it. I skip right over it.
I usually just say Top. So
even better. Even better. So it's 1 mana. You pay 1 colorless. Look at the top 1 colorless colon. Look at the top 3 cards of your library. Then put them back in any order. And you can tap it, draw a card, then put it on top of its owner's library.
It's a really powerful colorless form of card selection, and it can become extra draw depending on what you play it in. It's most notably used in like Elsha, because Elsha the Infinite, because she has a clause that says you can cast artifacts, I think, and more, but like artifacts is one of them, off the top of your library. And there's a few other commanders that do this too, where you can cast certain things off top of your library that may also make use of this, but it's basically you cast this off the top with her, and if you have, you have to have a cost reducer as well. So like a Foundry Inspector or whatever that reduces the cost of your artifacts by 1. So you can cast it off the top with her for free, then use its tap ability. If in between you want to shuffle cards around, you can too, but that's probably not really needed. But then you can tap it, draw whatever card's there, put it on top, and then cast it again for free with her and the cost reducer, and form a loop where you draw your whole deck, and then usually win with Oracle or Upreach Line or whatever.
If I use it in the blue-white Urza, the 3 mana 2/4 Urza, I use this in that deck because it's a cost reducer in their command zone kind of thing. Yep, there's a lot of decks that use this. Also notably used with sometimes in counterbalance decks, just to be able to, somebody casts something in response to the counterbalance trigger, you pay 1, rearrange your top, and then flip what you want to flip for the CMC.
Also, we were going to talk about Scroll Rack here, and the only reason I was going to bring that up is because I don't remember if I still play it, but I used to play it in Yuriko. But this is still in Yuriko, and this is a good way to at least manipulate the top of your deck a little bit. Scroll Rack was a way to do it really well because it shuffles your whole hand on top and you draw the same amount of cards off. It's good top deck manipulation. If you're in colors that don't have strong card draw, this is something that doesn't necessarily draw you cards all the time, but lets you pick and choose what you're going to draw next. And each turn you can see 1 card deeper. So, I mean, for 1 mana, that's not a bad effect. And then if you can, use it in conjunction with fetch lands, or it's really good with Brainstorm, which I kind of don't play Brainstorm anymore because I hate putting 2 dead cards back on top, especially if I don't have a fetch land to shuffle them away. So with this, you can with Brainstorm, you can kind of like look at the top here and go, oh, I don't like those, and then Brainstorm, and then, shuffle them around, draw some, draw none, whatever. So there's a lot of different ways you can manipulate the top, and so some decks want that, and Yuriko especially if you're playing like bird stuff. It's
funny because I cut it out of my Yuriko deck because of the Null Rod effect, so I don't play it in mine anymore, but I see it still played some. I think Brainstorm, as you mentioned, kind of fell out of favor when lovely Orcish Bowmasters came around, because 1 blue mana, deal 3 damage to my opponent. She goes, this is not a good rate. So, yeah, I agree. Brainstorm's definitely seen a lot less play.
I was cutting it before that off, honestly, but that's just me.
Yeah. Rings of Bright Hearth and Assault Monolith and Sensei's Top. You can also create a loop because it's tap : you can create a loop where you can copy that trigger. So you tap it, put it, so the trigger resolves it, it replaces itself on top, and you draw a card, and then you draw another card. So you can also draw your whole deck with that. That's another thing I've seen. Not in quite some time, but I have seen it.
And sometimes out of those 3, the card you need is there. Sometimes digging 3 is just enough to get you to that piece that you needed, or the tutor you needed, and then you just throw your top on top. You use the tutor, fucking top's gone, but it got its use. So it doesn't feed Dockside because you can always draw the card, put it on top.
That's true. As I say, the only caveat I'll throw out with this one is if you play this card in your deck, please, for the love of God, be efficient using it. We all know who I'm talking about, the types. If you played against them where they're like, every other freaking action, they're like, spin the top. Look at their 3 cards for 2 minutes, put them back.
Oh, these are still the same 3 I saw last time. I forgot.
Like, just be efficient with it, please, for the love of God. Anyway, that's all I got on that. Moving on, we've got a card that pairs very well with Sensei's top. That is Bolus's Citadel. It is black, and 3 generic. So another artifact with a color identity. It's a legendary artifact. You may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may play the top card of your library. You may cast a spell this way, if you cast a spell this way, pay life equal to its converted mana cost rather than pay its mana cost. And you can also tap it, sacrifice 10 non-land permanents. Each opponent loses 10 life.
Nobody does that. And if you do, it's only because everybody just happens to be that low. As it is, it's a cool way to help you dig. I've played it in a number of like Mardu lists and stuff, and top does well with it because you can use the top to draw the lands off the top to then, continue shuffling on. And then, you're only playing the top for the one life instead of paying its mana cost. So kind of has that cost reduce effect. You also have the other option to, pay 1 life and exile the land off the top. So you can basically do this through your whole deck unless you get a clump of lands. Then you might get stopped. But a lot of times this is enough to just end a game because you're in decks that are in black, your Grixis, your Mardu, you're doing Turbo Nazi kind of stuff. And this is your finisher to dig a little bit more or whatever the case. But this is also one of those things where it was used in conjunction, which is why we kind of put these 3 artifacts together. It used to be used in conjunction with Aetherflux Reservoir as well, because sometimes you can eventually, after a certain amount of time, the life you're spending to cast the spells, you're gaining back more life than you're spending. So it eventually gets to a point where you're just like, I can draw through my whole deck and then laser beam everybody down because, I outgained what I was losing. The main issue is the lands. So top in there helps you get around those.
Top and Necropotence see a lot of play with this together because you can look at the top card. So you'll know what it is. You can pay that 1 life to the Necro to exile it and then look at the next one. So you get to actually know what's exiled to Necropotence for a change if you have this in play, which is kind of nice. So it's the same kind of thing. You're using it to clear the top cards to then just play the ones you want or dig for your win. Super powerful card. You see this a lot in all the turbo crazy builds that people are coming out with, Rog, Timna, Diata, blah, 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 whatever it is. These weird 23, 24 land decks, a lot of them are playing this card. That tells you how powerful it is. It's a 6 mana artifact that's going in decks with 24, 23, 25 lands. Then it tells you something. So,
well, notably too, if you're in blue, you can cheat this into play because you can or even in red, you can entomb it with the 1 goblin and then use the other goblin or use the same goblin to bring it back out. There's also, like I said, if you're in blue, you can resculpt or transmute artifact one of your mana rocks into this, and you just have to pay the difference, which sometimes is
reshape. You mean not resculpt, right? Reshape.
Yeah, reshape. That one requires you to pay a few extra mana. I think you have to pay the.
No, it's like 2 blue and X. Yeah,
I don't think that one cheats. You got to pay.
I think you have to pay 6 to find it, but a transmute artifact, you just pay the difference. You can Whir of Invention and tap all your mana rocks to then find this, or your artifacts in general to play this. Yeah, so there's blue definitely can tutor this and put it into play. Well, the old non-trinket mage, the 6 or plus one can find this if you need to find it in blue that bad and put it in your hand, right? Notably, 2 of the cards we talked about earlier, Grafdigger's Cage and Weathered Runestone, shut down the ability to play off the top of your library. So you probably don't play this in the same decks that play those, because that's a non-bow that you don't want to run into. Moving on, card that's near and dear to my heart, that is Isochron Scepter, 2 colorless to play it. It has imprint, so when it enters the battlefield, you may exile an instant card with converted mana cost 2 or less from your hand. and imprint it onto Isochron Scepter. And you can tap 2 colorless, tap it. You may copy the exiled card. If you do, you may cast the copy without paying mana cost. The card that this sees the most play with is Dramatic Reversal.
Makes it to where any of your 2-drop instants can be played as many times as you want. With Dramatic Reversal, which reads untap all non-land permanents you control. So if you have 5 or 6 rocks out, you play this, you use this, you float all the mana, you untap everything, you play it again, you float all the mana, you now have infinite mana. If you're in Thrasios or 50 billion other fucking Dimir and or Simic and or whatever fucking color combination commanders that have come out in the last like 5 or 6 years, there's a billion of them. They're outlets in the command zone with infinite mana. This thing just does it. It's real susceptible to removal. The copies can be countered, and if they are countered, then this just sits there for a turn, and you have to try again next turn. The rock gets blown up. Obviously, you're out it and the spell, so that can be relevant, especially if you can't recur spells. But also notably, you can use stuff like Copy Artifact to make a second one, and then there's a couple other cards I'm not thinking of off the top of my head.
Like Phyrexian Metamorph.
Of this. Sure, there you go. So you can make copies of this, and then instead of imprinting, like say you already have one, with Dramatic Reversal, you can imprint a counterspell, like a Swan Song or something, or just regular counterspell, whatever the case may be, and then you have every time you need it, you've got protection repeatably, which is kind of nice. Sometimes you just use this in that same sense. I've seen people play, they didn't have the Dramatic Reversal, they had this in hand, they just said, fuck it, I want to counterspell every turn. So
yep. Nothing wrong with that.
That's not bad.
If you're behind or you need to just or the game's kind of stalled, you're like, why not have the protection every turn? Seems great. Notably, if you do
silence, you can have silence every single turn.
Yeah, why not? Notably, I was gonna say, if you do Swan Song, if you have this with the Dramatic Reversal and another copy of this with Swan Song, there's a way you can sequence it to end up with infinite 2/2 flying birds, which is fucking hilarious. Also,
you can't usually win with them right then, but if nobody has a wipe, they're dead next turn.
Right, and if they do, well, you have a Swan Song and infinite Swan Songs to counter it if you need to. So it's pretty good. Yeah, like you said, I mean, it is definitely fallen a little bit out of favor because cards like Boseiju exist that just totally shit on your day. But it is really nice because it not only can create, you need to be able to produce 2 colorless mana to tap it and activate it. So if you have Dramatic Reversal under this, even if you don't go mana positive at all, you have Infinite Storm, which is something.
Yeah, I mean, there's other cards that can capitalize off of that.
Yeah, because you are casting the copies, which is relevant.
If you have an Aether Frost Reservoir, this will
there you go.
End the game. So
this will laser beam everybody down after you have a billion life for sure. Up next, we have Lion's Eye Diamond. It is 0 to play. Sacrifice Lion's Eye Diamond. Discard your hand. Add 3 mana of any one color to your mana pool. Activate this ability only any time you could cast an instant. The goofy thing about this one in particular, everybody knows this combos with Brain Freeze and Underworld Breach. So there's your ability to pay for your breach and recur it, blah 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 blah. What's really goofy about Lion's Eye Diamond is that you don't have to tap it, which has gotten so many people. They're like, I've got the Blind Obedience. I've had Blind Obedience in play, or now the new Dauntless Dismantler. Like, I've got those in play. I'm stopping. No, doesn't stop this. It doesn't have to tap. Very annoying. Anyway.
Brain Freeze is the number one combo with this because you essentially you cast your breach, then you sack this to make blue, and then you sometimes you have to you use the. I guess you cast the Brain Freeze first. You cast the breach, or you do something else to mill yourself to get to some of the stuff we talked about, where you can do some self mill to get to a point where you now have the Brain Freeze, and then you can use Brain Freeze to mill yourself to make sure that you can continue the loop, and then you Brain Freeze everybody out to where they have no cards. That's the number one way it's used, but it also was first popularized, I think, with like the Bomberman stuff, which is or no REX Salvagers and this plus like I think
any of the bombs.
Rock or that too. Yeah,
there's like the spell bombs, like either spell bomb or Pyrite spell bomb. Draw your deck, shoot everybody to death. Heck yeah, love that combo. That was one that was near and dear to my heart as well. I also see this recently. It pops up in like Mardu Dargo decks. They're not Mardu, Jund Dargo. I'm sorry, Ikra Dargo is where I see this, where they can cast Dargo and then either Birthing Pod him away or Pattern of Rebirth him and then sack him to find Razaketh and then recast freaking Dargo and then sack Dargo to the Razaketh to find this. And then this lets them cast Dargo 3 more times and tutor up 3 more spells and put their damn win together. Yeah, it's nutty.
Yeah. It enables a lot of stuff. And then also it's one of those things where people are like, even though like we've kind of gone to where we're low on wheels. Back when wheels were being played a lot more often, a lot of times somebody'd have an early LED and they'd be sitting there, and then eventually they're like, "Well, I have only got 2 cards in hand. I don't give a shit about. I'm gonna wheel," and then they crack this in response, which either way they're discarding their hand, and then they float 3 mana of whatever color, and sometimes that's enough to then draw those cards and then get to a win or finish a win. If you can, even if you don't have brain freeze, if you're in Mardu or something and you're doing breach lines, this still helps because you don't really care about putting shit in your grave because you're casting from your grave. So you can just recur this over and over again to make the mana that you need to get to your win by casting tutors over and over out of your grave or whatever the case may be. So it has a lot of applications. I hated this card when people first started doing the brain freeze stuff. I was like, I hate this card. I don't want to use it. But I've recognized how powerful it can be, and I've done it myself.
There are times where I see people just in a similar vein to the wheel situation where they're sitting there with 2 crap cards in hand and their commander that is a card advantage engine, and they're like, screw it, crack this, discard my cards, cast my commander using this mana. And this, allowed me to cast my big fat commander to at least try and get back into a game like a Tivit or something. I don't know that. I don't remember. I know I've seen it recently in a game I was playing against somebody. They're like, I have nothing better to do. Discard my 2 worthless cards that I couldn't cast anyway to cast my commander to get me back in the game. So very powerful card. Birthing Pod is next. So this one, it's 3 generic and a Phyrexian green. So you can pay green or 2 life. And it has 1 generic and a Phyrexian green again. Tap it. Sacrifice a creature. Search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost equal to 1 plus the sacrifice creature's converted mana cost. Put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Activate this only anytime you could cast a sorcery.
So you can't do this on other people's turns. It is your turn only. It's the same line of text as Neoform, which is +1. It does the same thing as Eldritch Evolution, but Eldritch Evolution allows you to go up to 2. It's usually part of a line. I most notably have... I don't actually use this card. I use the new Vivian. But same idea. The Vivian does the same sort of pod effect. But generally you have a 1-drop or a 2-drop that goes into a 3-drop that goes into a 4-drop, and there's a line of cards that you get out of your deck. Sometimes you end up getting stuff that's like an Ewit through that line, and then the Ewit brings back something else that helps you do something else, and like it can get really convoluted and complicated, but it's also kind of the same vein as Yisan, and like I said, those other couple spells. So there's a lot of decks that like doing evolution stuff, and it's a really good card. This one suffers from stuff like No Rod, and so it can get turned off. It also suffers against Grafdigger's Cage. So there have been answers printed for this, and people play them. So you'll have to be aware when you're dropping this on the field, like somebody might play something where you can't use it anymore. But as far as, 1-card win cons go, which it essentially is, it's pretty powerful, especially because you don't have to... Everything else that we've mentioned, you have to pay mana for outside of the Planeswalker. So this is the only one where it's like you can supplement some of it with life, which can be, the difference between being able to do the line and not. Because,
4 versus 6
pay 1.
Pretty huge difference. Yeah.
Exactly. So
yep. And I mean, I see this the most common ones recently. I've seen it with, like I said, were the Dargo lines where you're sacking Dargo to go get Razaketh. I've also seen it the kind of line you were going into, like you in Naya Minsk, for instance. You sack Minsk to get Felidar Guardian. Felidar Guardian flickers this. You then sack Felidar Guardian to go get the Angel, the 5-mana 2/2 Angel that recurs the Felidar Guardian that blinks this, then sacks the Felidar Guardian to go get Kiki Jiki to tap Kiki Jiki to copy the Angel to bring back the Felidar Guardian to blink Kiki Jiki to make infinite Felidar Guardians attack. That's the line I see a lot. So.
I'm impressed that you could fucking pull that out of your hat right now. I was struggling a little bit ago trying to think like what is the line.
I can't remember the name of the damn angel, but that's the line.
Karmic Guide.
Karmic Guide. There you go.
And it's not an angel; it's a spirit.
Really?
I believe so.
I did not know that. Now I gotta look, buddy. Now I gotta look. 'Cause that's driving me nuts. I thought it was an angel. It's an angel spirit. We're both right. Hell yeah.
Oh, okay. 50-50 shot. We both
take it. That 100% counts on both ends.
Yeah.
But yeah. So Birthing Pod. I mean, there are other lines you can do with it. I have it in like a 5-color Friends Forever. The freaking Stranger Things. I don't even remember the two. Yeah. It's 11 and Mike. I have it in that where it can start at a pod line from 2 with corridor monitor and go all the way up to that kind of bullshit. So Yeah, very powerful.
There are lines that it exists, but otherwise it can be just like a Neoform or an Eldritch Evolution.
Yeah.
If you're in a Thrasios deck and you really want your Seaborn Muse and you got a 4-drop, well, you sack it to that and you get your Seaborn Muse.
Some partners are played specifically, like Tana probably is played for some decks or other decks where they're just for the Neoform line or Birthing Pod line, because they don't care about the lines of text on the card other than the CMC. Like I have Borborygmos and Fibblethip, where this can pod Borb straight into Niv Mizzet, which has won me several games. So
yeah, I mean, if whatever you're going for gets you the win, then and this is kind of like Spellseeker and some of those other cards where there are literally you drop this and you can win on the spot as long as a couple conditions are met, and that's that. So
we had next to it kind of, there's a similar little card that it's Pyre of Heroes. Different but similar. It's a 2-drop and it's 2 mana and tap it. Sacrifice a creature, search your library for a creature card that shares a creature type with a sacked creature and has a converted mana cost equal to 1 plus that creature's converted mana cost. Activated as a sorcery, blah, blah, blah. So it's a similar Birthing Pod-like effect, but only for kindred ability or kindred type cards. So
and
I've seen that played in like Iliad and some other decks before.
I've seen it in some decks. The place I played it was Malcolm Kedis, because you could take Ragavan into a Dockside into a Glinthorn. And that's not a terrible line, right? Like, you've already gotten value off of Ragavan, then you get a Dockside that gives you the mana to do what you need to do, and then you pot him into a Glinthorn and you just win on the spot, because Glinthorn Malcolm is just game over.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it could probably be used in other places. I know I have it I have an Elf Ball deck that's more on the casual side that I've used it for, just to have, like, if I have this 2-drop and I know I have a better 3-drop, just go get it. Not a combo, but just a value piece. And I mean, that's the same thing as Birthing Pod. You can use it as a value piece. It doesn't have to be a combo. So
sure. Well, and as the more kindred type pirates and dinosaurs and vampires and other random shit get printed, that card will only gain value. So that's definitely one to keep in the back of your mind if you're building it. So
it could pot a 1-drop like Triton Shorestalker into a Thassa's too, So
yeah, there you go. I don't know what the hell a Triton Shorestalker is, but I believe you, buddy.
It's a 1/1 unblockable I play in Yuriko.
Oh, there you go. Moving on, we've got Agatha's Soul Cauldron. This card is near
the new card area.
This card is redonkulous. It's like a planeswalker stapled together with an artifact. 2 to play it. Legendary artifact. You may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to activate abilities of creatures you control. You're welcome, Kinnan. Creatures you control with +1/+1 counters on them have all activated abilities of all the creatures cards exiled with Agatha's Soul Cauldron. So you're Walking Ballista and friends. And also tap it, exile target card from a graveyard. When a creature card is exiled this way, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. So it does 3 things, all 3 things, stupid powerful.
The ability to just fix your mana off the bat is pretty good. And that could be like the early game thing that benefits you. And then later on, you can do stuff to set it up to where, like I said, it essentially makes you, it's Necrotic Ooze at home.
Necrotic Ooze. Yep.
But it also kind of combines that and the effect of Maresil, because it's like you're putting those counters on something to give the ability of something that's in a graveyard, which is kind of like her Cage effect. And then it also has the, this creature with the +1/+1 counter gets the other effects. So it's weird. I haven't figured it out. I haven't played it in any decks. I haven't figured out any particular lines, but I already have heard from you and others that it has some strengths. So there's that new boy that just came out that I have seen people talking about. I know you know what the line is, but I don't.
It's really simple. Yeah. So before we get to that one, I will notice that I do want to mention that just you exile a target card when you tap it. So if you don't get a creature, you don't get the +1/+1, etc., etc. But you can just eat a Lion's Eye Diamond, a Brain Freeze, or whatever the hell else is in a grave and really screw somebody over. So sweet grave hate. But the line we were talking about, Francisco, is a new commander pairing. It's their partner. 1 black and 1 for a little 0/1 bird pirate. It's ridiculous. It can't block. It flies. It has whenever a pirate you control deals damage. I'm sorry, not combat damage. Deals damage to an opponent. You explore, which means you reveal a top card library. If it's a land, it goes in your hand. If it's non-land, you can put it in your grave. Or the important thing is you can put it back on top of your library, and then the creature that explored gets a +1/+1 counter. Or not the creature. Normally the creature that explores, but in this case, Francisco explores. when you have pirates deal damage. So the line is you get Francisco in play, you get Agatha's Soul Cauldron in play, you find a way to put Walking Ballista in your graveyard, you exile your Walking Ballista from your graveyard, you put a +1/+1 counter on Francisco, remove the counter, deal 1 damage to an opponent, explore, you reveal a top card library. If it's a non-land, you put it right back, you put a 1/1 counter on Frank, and repeat. Game over. Exactly. If you hit a land, then you're in trouble because then it goes to your hand, and then you have to wait a whole turn cycle to untap it. And hopefully there's another creature to eat to put a +1/+1 counter on Francisco. The cool thing you can do is if you put the 1/1 counter on Francisco, if he's been in play for a turn cycle, he's a 1/2 flyer at that point, you can attack with him. His attack damage trigger does the Explorer, so you reveal a top. If it's a land, you draw it. Then you remove his counter to ping somebody and hope the next card's not a land. So it's definitely...
It's not deterministic, but it's close.
It's close. It's not... Yeah, I mean, you're playing it in very low...
of setup. It is probably about the same amount of setup as most combos in Commander are.
100%.
So
100%.
I'm sure there's other ones too. I haven't watched the video yet, but I sent you a link, and one of my content creator brethren has made a deck or a video about like 10 different pairings that he did with it, and I don't know how many of those are viable or whatever. As I said, I haven't watched the video, but apparently we in the set review were like, this is fine. It didn't even make the top 10, and now it's like, well, maybe it deserved a slot, but at the same time, I still am not sold. That combo, great. It seems fine. Like, it's not bad, but it's also like, is that really what I want to be doing? I don't know. And I think as it goes on, people may hone it in and make it a little bit better.
Yeah, I can tell you in my testing. So I played against a friend who played it and was like just crushing the table with it. And so myself and then the Squeeze Knees, who's my brother, who I brew a lot of decks with, and like we do Magic the Gallivanting stuff on our Boxfield stuff. But anywho, we brewed a whole crap ton of decks with it, and in just goldfishing them and playtesting them, it really matters not which commander you pair with it. You can present turn 3 wins ridiculously consistently. You can present turn 1 wins, you can present turn 2 wins. If you mulligan down really bad, you can present turn 4 wins and turn 5 wins, etc. And
that's all with that same line?
With that line or other ones, I mean, that line is the quickest and easiest. If you can present turn 1 wins on a decent number of time with that, but more often than not, they're turn 2. And honestly, if you have any kind of a hand, turn 3 is the norm with that line. There are other lines in them, and that's where your other partner pairings will matter, to which your other backup lines are, or your other main lines, and this is your backup, etc. But
okay, so that's Francisco. Obviously, that's a thing. Now, I remember when the set first came out with Agatha, the actual card Agatha. I think it was you that had figured out a line with her. Can you recall what that was?
God, I don't even remember. I know that the line I see it a lot of times in now is like in Obnixilis. People do the similar thing with Obnixilis. They're exiling a Walking Ballista to put a 1/1 counter Obnixilis, shoot somebody for 1, exile a card, get a 1/1 counter Obnixilis, blah, blah, blah. I don't remember.
So it's all very much around Walking Ballista, it seems.
Triskelion or Walking Ballista are both. It's little buddies.
So
but
this guy is basically replacing the old Mikaeus then, as a cheap, out of the command zone Mikaeus.
Yep.
If you would have put it to me like that yesterday or whatever day it was that we recorded, I would have probably said, "Okay, sure."
Yep.
now I'm feeling like an idiot, but at the time looking at it, it was just like, this thing sucks. But
more testing, I'm telling you, that not only should we have had it in our top 10, it should have been number 1 or 2. Not even gonna lie.
I still like Kutzel better, but that's my own bias against.
I mean, that's where I'm okay with that. If it's number 2, it's fine. Kutzel's still nuts, and I still absolutely love that card. So, but yeah, Francisco being it's Necrotic Ooze and Mikaeus and other bullshit in your command zone. Anywho,
all right. Well, let's get to the drum roll.
Back number to the topic at hand. Sorry, sidebar everybody there. The number 1 card, or the last card we're going to go over, which is probably the number 1 artifact in cEDH at the moment, is the One Ring. Ding, ding, ding. Shocking surprise to everyone, I'm sure.
Well, 4 mana. Surprisingly, hold on. Surprisingly, though, I don't remember if you were, but I wasn't very high on it when it first got spoiled either. My whole issue was that everybody that was saying that it was better than Adnaz, better than this, better than that, and I still don't think that it's better. I think it's just different. It does something different. Yeah.
It does something different, but it does something stupid powerful, and it is everywhere right now. If you play a game and you don't see a One Ring, I'm surprised. And that's
I
probably
played in a lot of decks now.
Yep, same. But 4 mana, legendary artifact. It's indestructible. When the One Ring enters the battlefield, if you cast it, you gain protection from everything until your next turn, which means you can't brain freeze yourself. Remember that, everyone. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life for each burden counter on the One Ring. Tap it, put a burden counter on the One Ring, then draw a card for each burden counter on the One Ring. So it's a stupid colorless protection spell the turn you cast it, and a repeatable card draw engine that you can also do stupid stuff with, like Manamo to tap it, add burden, draw, tap a blue and Manamo, tap it, untap it, tap it again, add another burden counter, draw extra cards, Voltaic Key, Manifold Key, blah, blah, blah. Derevi draws a shitload of cards with this. It's a stupid, insanely powerful draw engine that sees a lot of play in our format.
One thing that I don't think anybody really thought of was that protection clause, because it is kind of second. Everybody wants card draw. That's why they like the card, and that's why it's really good. It does come at a cost, and if you are able to get it down super early and you're managed to keep drawing with it every turn, pretty soon you will have done enough life to yourself as if you did an ad nauseam, and you maybe didn't draw as many cards as you would have, which is why I don't think it's better. It's just different. But that protection clause comes in weird ways, because if you're at a fast table with like everybody's on really fast combo decks, and you cast this, and somebody tries to go and dual cast your Twin Flame, like, they can't attack you. They can kill everybody else, but you're still there. So it's kind of weird.
They can't attack you. You just don't block it and you take nothing. Yeah.
Right. Well, and then that's the thing. It's like a Teferi's protection, but like stapled onto an artifact that also, just draws you a fuck ton of cards. So that was the thing that caught me by most surprise, because I've seen it played, and then it was like, well, I can win right now, but I can't win right now because this motherfucker. So I got to pass and do nothing, and then he probably wins. Or if he doesn't, I got to wait all the way around the table. Maybe I still win, but maybe I don't. So
yeah,
that's
you're kind of
the part that's caught me off guard a lot. Yeah,
you're in that rough spot of you have twin flame dual caster, or you have a Kiki Jiki line. You can go for it and kill everybody else, but that one damn player with the One Ring who just drew 1 extra card, they're going to untap, bare minimum, draw 3 cards on their turn. 1 for their normal and 2 for this. It's like, do you really want to be 1v1 versus the person that's got the repeatable card draw engine? It's a rough spot to be in. Yeah.
Also, even just your Francisco lines that you were just talking about, you can't kill somebody who just played this. This hoses the Agatha thing, at least for a turn.
For a turn, you can do it in their upkeep. But anyway, the One Ring it's everywhere. It's warped the format. You see Phyrexian Metamorph played at a higher rate than you ever saw before. Copy Artifact has come back in fashion in a lot of decks because of the One Ring. Thada Adele is something I'm seeing played. I'm playing more because of the One Ring.
Made a top 16 because of the One Ring. Because they were just stealing it from people. Yeah.
That's nuts.
There's other stuff too where it's just like the Cursed Mirror. That's better because of One Ring. You only get it for a turn, but I mean, it's still card draw. There's other things that can steal it. There's other things that can copy it. There's other things that can the ones that we talked about in the set review, the blue card, and then also the Scheming Fence from Capenna, both can, and I think people should be playing those if you're in the colors for the One Ring specifically. Steal its ability
or both, yep.
Steal its ability or turn it off, yep. It probably warped the format more than Bowmasters or anything in the last year, I'd say.
Which is shocking, but I agree.
Everybody wants to steal it or shut it down or destroy it, so it's made the 99s of a lot of lists change.
People are playing, what's the 1 red and 1? It's from the Lord of the Rings set. It's deal 1 damage to up to 2 target creatures or exile target artifact. I see that played a little bit now because of the indestructible clause on the One Ring. You see weird stuff like that being played because it's indestructible. It's really hard to get rid of it.
That Chaos Warp thing that we were talking about in the set review, or the Wild Magic Surge, or even Chaos Warp itself might see a little bit more play just because it can tuck a One Ring.
Yep, I think it is definitely one of the most warping format cards that's been printed in the last year easily. I mean, it's right there. Maybe Bowmasters is probably right behind it. Agatha Soul Cauldron's probably right there in spot 3 or real close to it, but
I mean, the last thing that really had this sort of impact was probably Dockside, to be honest. To this level.
Yeah, and I would say Dockside really is even more broken, but yeah, I agree.
But yeah, that's why I mean, even though we normally don't order these or say, it's your mileage may vary, blah, blah, blah. This one, I don't think you can argue, is probably the best colorless artifact in the game.
Yep. Not named one of our honorable mention mana rocks like Mana Crypt. Probably this is it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're probably going to see Mana Crypt in more decks than this, for sure. Because there are decks that don't play this. few and far between, but there are decks. If you're on an anti-artifact kind of deck and you're using all the hate pieces to try and stop artifacts, then you're probably not playing this. But otherwise,
sure.
it's card draw that is repeatable and can be used in colors that don't have as much of it. Even though every color's basically got card draw, it's really efficient.
Yep.
People also said that it might not be played or not be as good because it's 4 mana, but then they print shit like Beseech the Mirror, and you pay 4 mana, and then you just tutor it to the field for free, and it's essentially playing it as if it was in your hand, but you get to tutor it out and play it anyway. So, yeah, I mean that, or like I said before, with like the Goblin Engineer, I think it is, where it mills or it puts it into your grave, and then you can use another artifact that's on the field and flip flop them with the Goblin Welder, and then
the Goblin Welder. Yep.
So it can be cheated into play. Anything. It could be tutored out with Magda if that's the route you want to go. If you're,
it's even a finisher in like Hullbreaker decks are using it because they create their infinite colorless, then they bounce the One Ring and they draw 1 card at a time until they win. It's nuts.
And the notable part is that you only take the damage from the burden counters on, I think it's your upkeep. Mm-hmm. So if you can exploit ways to tap and untap it infinitely, you can draw your deck and not have to worry about taking that damage. Although, if somebody can stop your win and then you have to go to your next turn, you're probably screwed. That would be a funny blowout. I'd like to see that.
I would not mind to see that either. But if they can stop that, then kudos. They did a lot. So,
but yeah, that's pretty much it. We got through. We were going to try and do a few more to balance this the way it was with the rest of our series, where it was like 5 of each color. But we got to 20, and then we were kind of reaching. And with all these honorable mentions in here, we actually named probably like 35, 40 artifacts already. So take that as you will. Whatever the case, we've got one more of these that we're going to try and probably get in before, too long. Maybe before the end of the year if we're lucky. If not, towards the beginning of next year. And then this series will be done. We still have that deck archetype series that we started off with Storm. Our next one, I think, is going to be Stacks. We haven't lined that up yet, but that's coming down the pipeline. We've got some other conversational pieces lined up too, and then, of course, we'll end up doing set reviews as they come along and all that stuff. So we look forward to finishing out the year strong. We'll probably take a break towards the end of the year with the holidays and whatever, and then get back to it in January, which will be right around the time we'll have an anniversary for having done this for a year. So that's crazy. Time flies.
No doubt.
Feeling like an old man, but, here we are. So yeah, I mean, that wraps it up. If you guys have questions, comments, concerns, anything you want to bring up, hit us up in the comments below. And hopefully on the next episode, we'll have some commentary and we'll do some housekeeping and share some of your guys' thoughts. But otherwise, you have any closing thoughts besides that, Kirk?
The only thing I would say is just if we missed something and we're Captain Obviously Dumb, just tell us in the comments. Let us know what we missed. That's all I got.
All right. That wraps it up for this show. We'll see you guys in a couple weeks, hopefully. And you have a great rest of your day, evening, week, morning, year, whatever the case may be.
Take care, everybody.